Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and you're listening to The Business of Content, a podcast about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. This week, I interviewed a blogger about how he generated $80,000 last year selling online courses. When Ben Collins launched his blog about Google Sheets, which is basically Google's version of Excel, he didn't intend for it to become a full-time business. He was just documenting his learning process and hoped the blog would serve as an online portfolio for when he went out to seek full-time employment. But he was surprised to learn that there was an actual audience for his blog post, and within 6 months he had thousands of visitors flooding his website searching for how to perform specific actions within Google Sheets. Eventually, this led to his first paying client, and before he knew it, Collins had more incoming business than he knew what to do with. But Collins wanted to create something a little more scalable, so he started developing an online course for those looking to master the Google Sheets platform. Within months of launching this course, he was generating thousands of dollars a month in passive income. I interviewed Collins about how he designed his course, how he marketed it, and how he decided on how to price it. Let's jump right into it. Hey, Ben, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Simon. Thanks very much for having me on the show.
So the reason I brought you on is because you've built an interesting career selling online courses, mainly through your blog. What is your blog about?
So my blog is about Google Sheets and how to do data analysis and how to do your job better if you use Google Sheets, and actually more widely, the G Suite platform.
Mm-hmm. So explain what Google Sheets is. So it was originally called Google. Was it always Google Sheets, or was it originally Google Spreadsheets?
Good question. I think I've only ever known it as Google Sheets, but it's an online spreadsheet. So it's like Microsoft Excel, except it's in your browser, and it's great for collaboration and sharing and sort of any kind of cloud work that you do. And it's part of a whole suite of tools that Google produce for office productivity. So they have docs, they have obviously email system, forms and slides, and that the whole group form a really nice interconnected web of technologies. And Google Sheets is kind of right at the heart of that, and the one that I do most of my work on.
It's basically it's basically Google's like version of Microsoft Office, like their whole suite of tools basically. And I've been using it for like going on 10 plus years now. In fact, it kind of weirds me out when a client insists on using Microsoft Word because I've completely forgotten how to use that.
Yeah, I can relate actually. I still have one client that I work with in Excel, and which luckily keeps me sharp on the Excel side, but it's sometimes you forget and you try and do something that's a shortcut from one in the other and vice versa, and you get the similar but slightly different.
So how did you become an expert on Google Sheets in the first place? Because like you kind of took like a circuitous path to it.
I certainly did, yes. So I'll give you just a brief background. I did math at college, became an accountant, a forensic accountant in fact, and that basically meant I spent every day in Excel for about 8 years and really learned to taught myself a lot of Excel stuff, including some programming, just so I could do my job better at the time, and I could automate things and be more efficient.
In Malcolm Gladwell speak, you put in your 10,000 hours.
Exactly, yeah. And really, I think that was it really, just time and doing the work really. And then a few years ago, I'd sort of started using Google Sheets, I guess about 5 or 6 years ago. Helped my wife with some of her business side of things because she was using Google Sheets, and found obviously a lot of that Excel knowledge just ported across. And then I started writing about Google Sheets myself because there was really very little content online at the time. And
you had like quit your job too, right?
Yeah, I left my job around this stage actually. I had a sort of one or two ideas at first that didn't really pan out, and then I decided I thought about actually trying to become a developer and pursued that for a while. But all the time I was writing about Google Sheets and data analysis and this type of thing for my blog, and that started to catch on a little bit in search and led to some clients, and then I kept going, and here I am.
And so you started blogging about it. What kind of articles were you writing? Like, you weren't like writing like a daily blog. You were like only writing like maybe a few times a month, but they were like very informative, meaty posts, right?
That's it. Yeah. So actually probably the frequency is a little higher initially than it is right now today, but they're still the same type of posts, big, long tutorials. And the very, very first one I ever wrote was about how to build like a little business dashboard in Google Sheets. And that was the one actually that caught on with traffic and was my number one post for sort of the first year. And that led to some clients who said, can you build one of those for me? And
So people would want to use Google Sheets to do some task. They would go to Google, and even though there were probably tons of blog posts and videos on how to do stuff um, in Excel, because that was the most widely used program, not as many people were using Google Sheets, and so you probably didn't have like a lot of competition in search results for these kind of tutorials. So you probably got to be like at the top of search results. So even though like you probably weren't getting a ton of traffic, it was very influential
Yeah,
traffic.
I think so. And I think that that point about the Excel blogs is really important because I've been using those Excel blogs for years myself and learned tons from them. And I knew they did online courses and consulting. Was a whole industry around Excel education. So I knew that there was, it was possible to make this work. And I realized when there was really very little out there for Google Sheets that there was kind of this opportunity to fill that hole and become a resource for Google Sheets people trying to do what I myself had been doing with Excel for years, and that kind of led me to keep going as well. That was part of the motivation and inspiration to keep the blog going. I'm sure as anyone who's ever started a blog can attest, you sort of have to put in a lot of work writing and doing your thing for a long time before you start to really see any traffic. You've got to be patient and sort of keep writing, but also keep trying to get the traffic because it doesn't just land on your doorstep.
And so, how long after you launched the blog did you start really noticing like a good amount of traffic coming in?
A good question. Maybe after about 6 months, I'd say. I think I wrote the very first post, I want to say sort of at the end of 2014, maybe. And it was probably about midway through 2015 that it was getting enough traffic to make it a little bit more interesting. And, there was comments and it started to lead to questions from people and then like that first client came along and things. So probably about 6 months, maybe.
So, like, were you expecting to build a business off of it, or did just just clients just started kind of falling into your inbox and you kind of like happily?
Yeah, there was no. It was not. There was not a business intention there. It was actually a blog I started to. I mentioned I was thinking about trying to become a developer, and it was partly a portfolio piece. So I wanted to write about technical topics that I knew about to showcase that I could understand technology and I could communicate about things. And that was really sort of the original motivation. So a lot of the initial posts actually were a mix of these Google Sheets posts and some old web development tutorial things on totally different subjects like Ruby on Rails and that kind of stuff. And they sort of never really caught on, and eventually I actually took those ones down eventually once they were out of date. But yeah, there was not really a business goal behind the blog when it started.
And who were these people who reached out to you? Like, what were they wanting?
So actually, the very first client wanted they were a small real estate broker in I think Arizona or somewhere, and the guy had about 5 or 6 people who worked for him, agents that would handle the calls and set up meetings and show people around the homes. And he wanted each day they would submit a bit of data about sort of what they'd achieved, if you like, or each week in terms of how many meetings they'd had and how many showings and deals and things. And he wanted to build a dashboard around that. So actually, the first job was to build a dashboard in Google Sheets showing that kind of data.
And did a light bulb immediately go off in your head that like this is a new business for me? Like I need to spend all my free time blogging and then use it as kind of like a lead generator for clients and kind of let those two things like feed each other?
A little bit, but it was also still a sort of slow process to get to that point. It took me about probably another 6 months to say, I'm going to go for this now, or give or take, because initially I still saw it as like, okay, I'll do these client projects right now, but I don't know if this is, I just got lucky and a few of these landed here, or whether it's really sustainable or what I actually really want to do next year. But the interesting thing is actually after probably about 3 of those types of project-based client requests, I actually went and did some teaching in person with a group that I'd taken a course with previously. And also right around this time is when my wife and I had our first son. So there was a lot of moving pieces in play right at that point. But I just thought if I keep the blog going and I keep writing and I keep learning and then trying to teach people, then it's only going to be a good thing.
So like you had a lot of traffic coming in from Google. What else did you do to try to start kind of building an audience and trying to have like a recurring audience? Like what are some of the like marketing stuff you were doing? Like, were you trying to build out a newsletter? Like, how are you trying to kind of build like a long-term kind of sustained audience?
Yeah. So I didn't really think about that point for the first year at least. And then I think around about the year mark, I probably put up a pop-up or form to collect newsletter signups. And, obviously it didn't explode or anything, but it started to trickle through. And then at the same time, I started to read more about what you need to do for digital marketing. And I talked to my wife a lot because she was in the space. And I created an ebook. So in January 2016, I sort of sat down for a couple of weeks and wrote an ebook about some cool tricks and tips for Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel, and launched that and put that as a sort of lead generator on the page. And that definitely bumped the email signups from a trickle to sort of a slightly more consistent handful each day.
So to translate, you put the ebook behind a wall, so that in order for them to receive the ebook, they had to give you their email address, and then you would email them like a PDF.
Exactly, that was it. And and it's interesting because it was tips and tricks for Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel, and back at that stage, I think almost all the way through 2016, actually, I was still very much thinking more of a broader data analysis topics for the blog. So it would cover Google Sheets primarily, but it also had Excel, it had SQL, it had Tableau, this kind of thing. And so that was at that stage, I was still in the midst of I was very broad still in my focus.
And how did you start thinking about then creating like an online course?
So again, that idea went back quite far. I think when way back, I mentioned I used to read these Excel blogs, and I saw that they all had courses. And although I hadn't ever paid for one of their courses, I think, signed up for one or two free ones along the way somewhere, and realized that this was a thing that people did, and it was a revenue stream for these people who ran these online blogs, where some people might create products, but there was also this big community that created courses. And I was really interested in that idea. And then when I started the in-person teaching, so that was for a company called General Assembly teaching their data analysis class, it really got me interested in the idea of teaching again. And so way back, probably mid 2016, I was mulling over this idea of creating this course. And so actually, even before, probably early 2016, I said I'd like to create the course, and figured it would just be, I'll just spend a month doing it and launch it. And it took a lot longer than I expected, as you might imagine. But I actually started the process, I want to say maybe around April or May 2016. And it was this Google Sheets dashboard course, because they were the topics that had caught on in search, and they were the things that the clients had been asking about. And so I sat down and I created a lot of materials for the course, some draft dashboards, if you like, that I would go and teach. But then I got busy again with other work, and sort of it went on the back burner for 3 or 4 months. And then I picked up again in the fall, and finally launched the first course in February of 2017. So just almost 2 years ago.
And what was the appeal of the course? Like, was it that because up until then you had to do a lot of custom work working with individual clients, this could be something where you could have kind of more passive income?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of factors, actually. So I liked the idea of, the passive income. It's scalable, obviously. That they're nice ideas. And then I really, really enjoy teaching and seeing the transformation that people go through when they understand the topic and then can apply it. And so that really motivates me. And then also I love creating and researching topics. So if I say I'm going to go and teach a topic on X, then it's sort of a chance to go and really dive deep into X and turn over all the stones and see what you can do with it. And that's really appealing as well. And so, yeah, it was a combination of factors for me that really appealed.
And what, like, that first course, like, what went into it? Like, is it like a series of videos? Was it like worksheets? Like, what do you get put into a course to like make it actually like valuable to someone?
So I think that you have to solve problems that the people are trying to solve, and then you have to sort of have a clear idea of where they are before they take your course and where they're going to be after they've taken your course, and make sure that they get somewhere they want to get to. And I didn't really understand a lot of that when I first created that first course. So I was kind of lucky that the topic turned out okay. But I think that I approached it from, okay, I'm going to teach everything about X, rather than saying, okay, here's a business problem, we're going to try and solve it, and it just so happens that X is the tool to do it. So let's go through teaching about X. So it's really coming at it from the from the eyes of your customer or your students rather, and seeing it from their perspective and saying, okay, what would be really useful for them to learn? And so when I did it though in 2016, when I was preparing these topics, I guess I had my background to rely on. So I knew I'd built hundreds of dashboards by then for both my old finance job and then for clients with Google Sheets and things. And so I had a pretty good idea of what people wanted to do and what they struggled with. So that in a way I suppose had sort of answered that really. And so I decided to just actually teach this course through a very, very practical hands-on approach of saying, okay, we're going to learn how to build these 5 dashboards, starting with a very simple one through to a complex one. And I'll just teach you essentially we'll just walk through the building of them rather than doing any kind of lectures about theory and that kind of thing. So that's how I sort of approached it.
And they're like videos. It's videos mainly of your computer screen of you showing them how to do it with your voiceover
Exactly,
on top of
and
it.
it was entirely that for the first course, and it ended up being around about 75 videos that are sort of between 5 and 15 minutes long, and that's a fairly hefty course. I think it was about 9 hours of content, which is why it took me forever. So like I said, I created some content in early 2016, left it for a few months, came back to it in the fall, and basically spent sort of most of the fall through to the February, about half and half between that and the client work. It was just sort of because the very first time you do it, you have to learn how to do that recording. It sounds fairly simple, but to record your screen, have it really clear, have it the right resolution, the right aspect ratio, and all that kind of stuff takes trial and error. Then you have to get the audio right, and nothing's ever perfect, but you have to get it to a good enough quality. So you have to learn about that. Then you have to learn about which platform you're going to host your lectures on. So there's a whole raft of things you have to learn about, which takes a lot of time the very first time you go through.
And what platform did you choose, and what went into your thinking behind it?
So initially, I was thinking about publishing on Udemy because that was the only one I'd heard of, and they're the biggest. But then I started to research it a little bit more and found out that their business model is different than more like a self-hosted platform. And I think Udemy works quite well if you can really get a lot of students, you can do well there. But if you don't get very many students, then they discount things so steeply for the sales they do, the sort of holiday sales, that you might create this fantastic course and they'll sell it for $10 on the course. They'll reduce the cost down to $10 and keep half of that. And I just thought about all the effort I'd put in, and then I was only going to get $5 each time someone signed up, and that seemed crazy to me. So even though they had the scale of a huge marketplace, I decided that I'd rather actually try and build my own sort of student community, if you like, and where I could actually, they would be students with, with me, rather than students of Udemy that I just almost sort of provided a course to. So once I realized that distinction, I went looking and found Teachable, and they've been a really great platform. Actually, they're a little bit like a sort of WordPress for courses, so you can design a site and upload stuff and create landing pages and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And so, what did you ultimately end up pricing your course for?
So that very first course I priced at $149 for that first when it came out, and then I did a discount when it launched, and I did a discount for the first week down to $75.
And how did you kind of land at those prices?
So I just looked around at other courses that were comparable. So I looked at a lot of the Excel courses and programming courses, and they ranged from about $49 up to say $300 or $400. So I picked somewhere sort of vaguely in the middle, and just went with that. Really, it was all a bit of an experiment at first. And the other thing I realized is that I used to, and this is true for many things actually early on in this sort of online career, is I used to get very hung up on, should I have a price point at this much or slightly higher or slightly lower? Or another example is, should I use my name, Ben Collins, or should I try and come up with a brand name and go with that? And I spent a long time thinking about that question. And I've realized now that really you're better off just making a decision and then moving forward again. And then, in a few months you can change it if you need to. It's very fluid and flexible. So I don't get too hung up try not to get too hung up on sort of decisions. If I can justify it, once I've done some research and I can make a decision, then I can move on and keep going rather than humming and ahhing over it for too long.
Take me through the launch of the course itself. Like, how did you market it, and what kind of like adoption did you see out of the gate?
So I had an email list of, I think, around about 2,500 when that one launched in February of 2017. And really the only marketing I did was I did a series of emails to my list. I think probably 3 or 4 over that launch week. And I hadn't really done much research into sort of the strategies behind launches at that stage. So they were just telling people basically about the course and what was in the lectures and what you'd get from it and things like that, and sort of answering some questions. But it did pretty well for that first launch. Well enough anyway that I felt like, okay, this is worth continuing and doing another one and seeing where I can get to with another one, and sort of it didn't flop. It wasn't spectacular, but it also was enough to say, okay, this is it was great and it's worth keeping going with.
And where did you see the adoption? Was it mainly just out of the gate, or was it like a slow, steady trickle as time went on? Like, were people coming in through Google and converting? Like, where did you see like a lot of your conversions?
So there were a lot of conversions that first launch week when I just blasted out to my email list, and because I did for that launch week, I also knocked the price down to 50% off, so it was $75 that first week. So I had almost 100 people sign up that first week, and then going forward after that, they were pretty slow coming through at first, but they would still, I'd see a few sales each week, and that's just slowly built up. And actually, it was a bit more than that, because I put it in the sidebar of my website, and I would occasionally sort of mention it in blog posts or in emails and things. So actually, the sales they kept going. They weren't crazy high or anything, but it was still a nice sort of side income coming in there that's built over time.
So tell me about that in terms of how it's built over time. Like, is this turned into a full-time living yet, or you've been doing it since, you said, 2017? What have you continued to do? Like, how many new courses have you launched, since then? What's kind of your work schedule like now?
So in 2017, I probably did about half and half with the courses in terms of time, with the courses and with the client work, maybe slightly more actually client work. And so the courses contributed, a decent chunk of revenue, but it wasn't sort of enough to pay the bills. And then last year in 2018, I did more client work at the front end of the year and sort of slowly did less and less client work. And so I'm mostly working on the courses now. And just to kind of give you an idea, so right now I have 5 paid courses and 2 free courses. And last year in 2018, the courses made around about just over $80,000. And there's, that it's sort of, I have to caveat that figure a little bit in that there's a slight delay in terms of when I actually get paid that money. And obviously I have costs that still come out of that as well for all of the business expenses. And then this year, I think I'll move almost entirely over to the courses and see where I can get to.
And so in terms of like when you're thinking about a new course, what goes into deciding what that next course is going to be about?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I sort of alluded to it a little bit earlier when I said that, talking about here's tool X, I'm going to go and just try and find out everything about it and teach that. And that's sort of the approach I started with. And it worked. I was sort of lucky it worked well because people wanted to learn about tool X. But I've come to realize that the better way to think about the next course idea is to find out the real world problems that people are trying to solve, and find out enough of those real world problems that sort of group around a subject, and then take that subject and say, okay, let's go and create a course around X. So for example, the next course I'm working on is about how to automate your workflows in G Suite. And I could have called it, how to learn this topic called AppScript, which would be sort of how to learn, this coding language. But I'm trying to go for more of the angle of, how to solve your business problems or how to automate your business in G Suite, and we'll be using AppScript to do that, if you like. So there's a sort of subtle difference, and I think that then becomes a more powerful proposition then to people, because you're not it's not saying, here, come and learn this for personal development. It's really, hey, let's sort of learn this so we can be better at our jobs, or we can make our business more efficient, and that kind of thing.
You mentioned that you had 2 free courses. If you were already having success with the paid courses, why bother with the free courses?
Yeah, a great question, actually. And so 2 things, really. One is that I wanted to, again, grow my list, grow the audience, because I need to keep growing that to be able to, scale the business. And so the ebook I mentioned, it was doing pretty well, but it was not sort of running away with it. And I thought I'd seen a JavaScript instructor create a free 30-day challenge course that just absolutely gone almost like viral, if you like, in the course world. It had a few 100,000 people sign up for it, which sort of was so impressive and inspiring that I thought that, maybe a free course would be a good idea to see if that works for me. And it's done. So I launched one in December 2017 that's had 7,500 people sign up now. And then one I launched in December of 2018, so just about 3 weeks ago, that's had over 3,000 people sign up. And so they've really helped grow the list and grow the audience, and and a percentage of them obviously, well, hopefully, will convert to paying customers down the line.
And what's your blogging like now? Like how often are you blogging? How has it evolved over the last few years as you've developed these courses?
Yeah, so the blogging, it's evolved in, I still focus on the longer, very in-depth tutorial style articles where I'll say, here's how we build a dashboard in Google Sheets, that same example, or here's how we use AppScript to automatically sort of reply to Google Forms or something like that. And then sort of go through and break it right down. So almost like how I teach a course, but in text format rather than video format. And so I still take that approach mostly. And I write some other posts like year-end reviews and the occasional little essay or news piece or something, but not too often. And in terms of frequency, I still probably post maybe 3 times a month, I'd say. I would like to do a bit more, but it's just hard to find the time to do all of these things, obviously. And I definitely focus on quality over quantity, though. There's a website called backlinko.com that I followed for a number of years, SEO blog, and he writes very, very long posts. And I think he's only published about 30 or 40 over the last 3 years or so, but it still has phenomenal traffic. So I kind of knew that, you can take the model of posting every single day as one option, and that does really well, or you can also have great success with these very long, very in-depth articles.
So you mentioned that like part of the motivation behind this was to kind of have passive income. How much do you feel like you could kind of take a step back from it? Like how much are you working kind of a typical 9-to-5 schedule versus how much are you able to could you just walk away for 3 or 4 weeks and it just keeps on, going like a finely tuned machine?
Yeah, it's definitely not a finely tuned machine at the moment. I'm still working hard on a lot of things actually. And one of the focuses this year is on things like marketing funnels, because they are a little rudimentary at the moment, the way it's all set up. So I'm trying to focus on that. But actually, I don't really, my intention is not to create a passive income to be able to walk away. I actually really enjoy the teaching and enjoy the research and the discovery. So, I don't really see myself trying to create a job that I can then, or a passive income I can then just, walk away and relax. I enjoy what I do each day. So definitely the motivation for me is to build this, to scale this, and to keep, helping people and keep learning new things myself. So yeah.
So you blog about a very narrow niche. Is that the kind of thing that you think does well with online courses? Like, do you think that's part of the reason why you succeeded?
I do. I think that when I sort of niche down onto Google Sheets and the G Suite area is when things really took off with the web traffic and the courses sort of, there was a lot of clarity for me around what my next courses would be and where I was going with those. And so these tools are so specialized, and if you're an organization that uses tool X, then you're not going to be interested in something that somebody who writes about tool Y as well, because you'll be able to go and find an expert on tool Y if you want that knows more than I would ever be able to know if I tried to cover them all. So I think that really focusing on a niche is a great idea, and I think that being said, though, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into not being able to ever break out and do something different or more interesting if you wanted to. And I think that if you become established in a niche, then you can sort of broaden out from there and still see a lot of success, rather than the other way around. If you try to be broad forever, then you might find it hard to gain traction. I don't know.
Okay, Ben. Well, those were all the questions I had. Where can people find you online?
So they can find me at my website, which is benlcollins.com, or on Twitter at that same handle. And they're probably the best 2 places.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks very much, Simon, and have a great day.
Okay, that's all we have for you today. Be sure to subscribe to the Business of Content on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. See you next week.